Blue Mind is a platform to raise consciousness and to elevate your performance and develop your physical and emotional health. We interview experts in mind and body, writers, sports people, entrepreneurs, and those with an inspiring story to tell to help us all raise our performance to the next level. So welcome to Blue Mind.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode on the Blue Mind YouTube channel. Absolutely delighted to be back for another episode. I think consistently now our fourth episode in a row, which is excellent. Ed and I spoke at the beginning of the year about improving on our consistency. And as this is more of a passion project, it feels like we're really committing to that. If you've missed the previous episodes, go back and have a watch, have a listen. We've had some absolutely brilliant guests on recently, and I'm absolutely, and it feels like I say this a lot, but I'm super pumped about this one and delighted because this is somebody that I actually spoke to for the first time today, and he's someone, a mutual contact has mentioned him several times. I thought I have to speak to this guy, have to speak to this guy. So the good news is Ed's here. Hi, Ed.
Hi. I've just managed to get myself off my camera, so just excuse me while I get back to see you. Hi, how are you, Mark? You good?
Yeah, all is well, my friend. Let's get into it. I was going to do my best. You're back in the room. I was going to do my best to introduce our guest, but it feels like he's better positioned to introduce himself and go into a bit more detail. But a little bit of background. So Ed and I, Blue Mind, people reach out to us on a weekly basis when they've truly hit rock bottom. So we're talking suicidal ideation here, people who negative self-talk. One of these people reached out to us over 12 months ago, and he was extremely vulnerable, and he talked about how there's this guy that's doing some insane work in terms of in the identity space, behavioral change space. Andy McMenemy, welcome to the Blue Mind Show. Great to have you on. I would
absolutely. Andy.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and I think the best place to start, as always, let's get straight into it. Tell us about yourself, Andy. Who we let on a little bit that this is going to be about identity.
Yeah.
Who is Andy?
That's a really good question. I sometimes ask myself that. Well, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm being absolutely honest and not being at all modest. I am just an ordinary guy like anyone else. But I do sometimes get these weird and wonderful dreams and ideas about where my potential lies, and then I go chasing it and trying to fulfill it, I guess. And I have the honour of being the only Scotsman to be awarded the True Englishman of the Year award. I was invited down to London. In fact, you can see the little there it is, just above me there, St George on his horse, and the certificates on the wall. I was invited to London, and I was presented with the honour of True Englishman of the Year in 2012 and inducted into the same Hall of Fame as Sir Steve Redgrave, Sir Ian Botham, Sir Ranulph Fiennes, Sir Roger Bannister, and many others. And that was for some extreme endurance events I did, and for being an inspiration to others in that field. And I guess where that came from is, anyone's guess, because I never saw it coming. I was just trying to achieve my potential and stepping out of my comfort zone to do that. I spent 22 years of my life in the corporate world, growing my business career in the motor industry. And I started at the very lowest level of the industry at 26 as a car cleaner. 22 years later, I was running 17 million pound divisions in 500 million and 1.3 billion pound organizations. But as I shared with Mark earlier, Ed, I collapsed through stress on that journey into a convulsive fit one morning at 10 o'clock in my own bathroom at home. And I never saw that coming either. But I remember
convulsions is like an epileptic fit.
right?
Yeah.
It's,
So my wife said, when I came through the ensuite to talk to you, you turned to look at me and you came out of the shower like you were felled by a lumberjack's axe.
yeah.
You broke your fall with your face on the bathroom floor and you were into a full-on convulsive fit. Your head was banging, your arms were going, your legs were going. She said, I arrested the fit. In my mind, I'm looking at the wash hand basin thinking, what the hell am I doing looking at the wash hand basin? I need to get up, I need to get up, I need to get up. Crazy. But after many kind of appointments, etc., I remember the neurologist saying to me, we've got no understanding of why this should have happened. You haven't had a stroke, you haven't had a TIA, you haven't had a heart attack, but you must have been under an immense amount of pressure. And your brain and your body would have been giving you signals that you were choosing to ignore. And the brain is primarily only interested in survival, so it shut you down to pay attention. And I did. And I absolutely did. I paid attention. And, and in the journey since then, I've done many things, extreme endurance events, running across the Sahara in the Marathon des Sables, running across Namibia, 3 marathons in 24 hours. I supported Helen Skelton from the BBC when she tackled the same race. And then I set out to really put my flag on the map of world endurance by challenging the Guinness World Record, which in 2010 stood at 52 marathons in 52 days with no days rest. And I ran 66 ultra marathons in the UK, in each of the 66 official cities, to raise awareness and very much needed sponsorship and funds for ABF, the Army's national charity, the Soldiers' Charity, to support the great work they were doing, helping veterans coming out of Afghanistan at the time. So, many of them suffer significant emotional injuries as well as physical injuries, and a long legacy of post-traumatic stress and other emotional turmoils as a result of the way their identity has been affected by their experiences, So it kind of meshed very well into that. And at the time I was doing solely business coaching, but in 2015, a young military veteran who was running his own businesses asked for some consultancy time. And instead of sitting in a hotel with a coffee, could we go for a walk in the hills, which I agreed to do. And during that time, he confessed that he was basically suicidal at the end of his tether. And I was the last person he was going to reach out to. I thought, no pressure. But I was petrified. I felt woefully inadequate, unable to be confident I could decondition the trauma and help him there and then. And all I could do was point him to the direction of his GP. All he got from the GP were antidepressants, and it took 63 days to get him face to face with somebody who could listen to him and help him. And I found that woefully unacceptable. So I qualified and am a medical board certified clinical therapist. So I now work in that arena and, helping people to deal with the traumas of emotional distress, whether it's divorce, whether it's redundancy, whether it's just feeling a loss of control in their lives. So I think we're all on the same sheet, guys, as the work that we do.
Are your clients amazing information there, Andy? I've got so many questions. Are most of your clients men or women, just out of interest?
A good mix. Of the 11 people that I've recovered from suicidal ideation, only 3 of them were women.
Yeah, I mean, as I said to you before, I very much want to touch on suicide ideation and potentially maybe recognizing attributes of people who may be suicidal, which is probably helpful to a lot of people who might be listening, or even if they are feeling suicidal themselves. Maybe that's for later on. If I may, the immediate question, unless Mark wants to stop me, is why did you do what was the catalyst for doing these endurance races?
It was kind of after collapsing through stress and realizing that, I didn't want to continue in an industry where I wasn't feeling in control of myself. And I was petrified by the words of the consultant in that last final meeting, the neurologist. He said, Andy, you haven't had a heart attack, you haven't had a stroke, and you haven't had a TIA, but had this been a stroke, only 1/3 of people get away from a stroke with no ill effects. And at 44, you could be sitting here, paralyzed down one side of your body for the rest of your life, or your heart could have been so badly damaged by the heart attack that you'd be, in medication for the rest of your life. And that petrified me, Ed. I was absolutely petrified of the prospect of that.
Did you enjoy your career, or did you live it in a permanent state of imposter syndrome and anxiety?
No, I have to be honest. I enjoyed the career. I loved the cut and thrust of business, and for me, business was all about building relationships. You know, my role was there simply to build relationships with clients, and then teach my team how to do what I had done so successfully, so that they could grow their divisions in the business that I was responsible for. So it was very much a case of mentoring and coaching my teams and helping them to grow their relationships with their clients. That's how we earned business. So I love the cut and thrust of business, and I love the coaching and mentoring aspect of it.
So leaving the career to take a different tack was a function of the incident, but I believe you also had a kind of fork in the road anyway at that time, did you?
Yeah, the coaching and mentoring seemed to be a natural progression. So I set up my own consultancy, delivering coaching, etc. And then that was 2008 when I left the motor industry. And of course, 2010, you know, we were still in austerity when I was planning to do the extreme endurance events. But that was very much a function of me trying to reconnect myself with my identity. Who was I? You know, what was my sense of meaning and purpose? You know, two of the emotional needs that we must get served, along with a sense of achievement and accomplishment. And you know, I knew there was a lot of potential inside of me, and I knew there was a lot of
Had you always been a runner? Had you always done marathons and stuff?
I'll be honest, I ran a marathon at 25, but I didn't do another one until I was 45. It's called a long recovery.
It is. It's called a long warm-up for sure.
Yeah. But no, so I didn't enjoy running per se, but I enjoyed the process of spending time in my mind, you know, decompressing from the day of work, etc., and just losing myself in the environment, you know, which is really beneficial for us and very nutritional for our emotional well-being.
Mark, do you want to jump in? Because I've got a lot of things I want to say about all this. So maybe you can make some comments. Because my son, Andy, my son told me to stop monopolizing the conversation and let people speak. So, yes, Charlie, I'm listening. Thank you, son. Love you. Go on, Mark.
He's clearly very observant. For me, it's quite clear where this conversation is going to go. You know, Andy, what you've done physically and mentally in terms of resilience is quite astonishing. But the real meat, I believe, that brings us together here today is this idea of losing yourself, your identity, or thinking that you're losing yourself, which then is resulting in a form of stress, anxiety, pressure, suicidal thoughts, right? A mutual, as we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, mutual contact brought us together. Ed, you interviewed the gentleman from the Jordan Legacy. Andy, I understand that's again an organization that you're involved in.
Correct.
This is a brutal topic, which doesn't seem to be going away, and we feel like we have an obligation to continue to discuss it. And for me, I would absolutely love to dive a little bit deeper in terms of perhaps even some stories, because I always try and put myself into an observer's situation, someone observing this conversation. And if you're currently sat in a place going, gosh, you know, it's just that negative self-talk, it's just this noise is continuously there. I roll out of bed and it's still there. So I just want to dive a little bit deeper into that and to talk about, first of all, why, Andy, you feel that happens, the reasons for why that might be happening. And we'll go on, we'll progress into some solutions as well. Ed, is that in line with where you wanted the conversation to go?
Absolutely right. I think for putting the viewers' shoes on, I think I'm very interested in purpose. Andy, you've obviously something's driving you to do all this stuff, and I love what you're doing, and thank God you left the car industry, right? So I think that whole kind of midlife, you know, a lot of men feel frustration, lack of purpose. They're stuck in situations of mortgages and funding things, and I think there's a bit on that I'd like to get your comments on, maybe being scared of change. So so mental health, suicide, purpose. I think maybe leave the endurance stuff out. Clearly you're a fit guy, can run around a lot, right? But it's the why that I think we want to get to. So yeah, Mark, that's cool.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes that resonated with me quite significantly was one by Desmond Tutu that said, instead of going downstream and dragging drowning people out of the river, we should be going upstream and finding out why they're falling in. And that's where I think this realm of emotional well-being, and particularly if we focus on guys, I suppose, it's the area that they least feel comfortable talking about. And it's the area that is the only area you can influence to stop that descent into what I call persistent negative self-introspection that leads down a sliding scale of even more stress-fueled emotions.
Can you say
Now,
that,
I don't
can you say
talk,
that
I
again,
don't,
Andy?
so
do you mind just saying that because that for me was extremely powerful around
absolutely.
introspection. Could you just,
So the clinical definition for depression is persistent negative self-introspection.
Yeah.
So all we see is the negatives, and all we do is beat ourselves up on a sliding scale that takes us further down the resilience scale to the point where we get to depression. That's not the worst place to be. The next step is hopelessness. And when we get to hopelessness, everybody that I've recovered from suicidal ideation got to the stage of hopelessness where they just decided to take their own life to end the pain. None of them wanted to die. All of them wanted the pain to go away.
Yes.
And when we think about the origin of the pain, it was simply their fixation on the negative aspects they were locked into. And the way to recover someone from that is to take them to the point of acceptance that there is something they can do within their control. And when you give them acceptance and are willing to step into that realm with them and help them, you can then ignite the little flame of hope that's inside of them. And when you ignite that little flame of hope and blow some oxygen into it, it can turn into a fire. And then they've got courage to take the next step. And so the work I do, and the work that very many of the very good therapists do, is helping people to take that ascending scale of emotions, which takes them back to a sense of purpose in their life, a sense of meaning, recognizing past achievements and accomplishments, and the amazing set of skills and resources that they have available to them that they've simply lost sight of.
Wow. I mean, Andy, do you believe that the brain, you are your thoughts? Do you believe that the more you spiral into negativity, the brain will teach itself to feed off those thoughts and literally focus on them?
Yeah, you see, the thoughts don't come first. What drives behavior is emotion. And so our emotions create chemistry. And if you've ever had if you were a young child, a 5-year-old boy, and you got a fright or somebody bullied you at school, immediately you're pumped full of adrenaline and cortisol. So an emotion is the chemical tag the brain attaches to the outcome of a situation that you survived, because the brain is primarily only interested in survival. So if I survived that situation, how did I do it? Because if that situation crops up in the future, what do I need to do next? And so the chemistry drives our emotions. Sorry, our emotions drive the chemistry. The chemistry affects our organs and makes us feel incredibly uncomfortable. And so many times people in the stress cycle or in the descending scale of depression are literally racked in pain. They've got aches and pains all over their body, not only in their head because they're overanalyzing all the time, but their body chemistry is affecting the way they feel, and it makes them feel powerless and hopeless. So do you believe
that people, and again, I'm not a scientist, do you believe that people get addicted to the familiarity of the emotion or the feeling? So they repeat it in their minds because it's a familiar thing to them.
Absolutely. And the more you focus, so your energy flows where your attention goes.
Yeah.
And so if you're focusing on the negativity, you're just going to spend more time focusing on it. And our brain is designed to show us more of what we make an emotional connection to.
Absolutely.
If you've ever thought of buying a new car, what do you see everywhere you go once you've made that emotional connection?
Aston Martin.
Exactly. And the same applies to negativity.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The amygdala, the part of the brain that is our brain's security guard and regulates our emotions, we know from neuroscience is 75% weighted towards looking for negativity. Now, that's not to say we're negative minded, but what the brain is trying to do is recognize the potential threats in the negativities and then formulate strategies to deal with them. So it can be.
So sorry, Mike, sorry to interrupt. So my first point of interception here is, if you are recognizing that you're going down more and more negative thought spirals and get not depressed, but becoming more, becoming more negative minded, what is it you would suggest they do to break the habit of that spiral or rabbit hole?
So the first thing is to practice gratitude. Start listing things that you're immensely grateful for in your life, because there will be many of them, but you're just not focusing on them.
Sure.
And, maybe just start with one or two. And then you need to learn to control your breathing, because the brain's mechanism of survival is by definitely controlling the central nervous system. And so the way we come off an elevated plane of anxiety is to calm the nervous system down. And the only way we can do that is by breathing. So here's a very simple technique anybody, anywhere can practice. You breathe in for a count of 5 seconds through your nostrils only. Imagine the air going down your spine and curling up in a ball under your belly button. You hold that breath for 4 seconds. And in your mind, you say, I have a calm mind. I have a strong body. I can cope with this. And then you slowly catch your heartbeat during those 4 seconds. It will be beating. And you breathe out through your nose for 9 heartbeats. So you breathe in for 5, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 9. That's 18 seconds. You do that 3 times, you're only breathing 3 times in a minute, as opposed to 30 times a minute in stress response. And that activates the vagus nerve, which calms down the central nervous system and brings forward the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, relax, restore, digest.
Wonderful. You've just saved people a lot of hassle going to a breathwork session now.
And then what you do is you increase your hydration to 2 liters a day in the first 10 hours of your waking day. So if you wake at 7 in the morning, between 7 in the morning and 5 in the evening, you consume 2 liters of liquid. And that will serve to flush out the toxicity that's being created by the stress chemistry. And it will make you feel literally in your organs more like yourself that you used to feel like before the stress.
Sure. So am I right in saying that the cortisol will improve or increase inflammation?
Cortisol's purpose is to dial down everything in the body that's non-essential to fight or flight. And so if you've ever had the flu, how much energy have you got to go about business? None. Yeah. So your immune system will steal 80% of your available energy to save your life, to fight the virus or fight the bacteria. So it switches off your ability to access that energy. And your brain instantly recognizes, if I'm in fight or flight response, the last thing I want to do is the immune system to kick in and only leave me with 20% of my energy. So cortisol shuts the immune system down, it dials it down, but then the brain goes, well, that's not very safe. If I get injured, I need to prevent myself bleeding out. So inflammation, as you quite rightly said, Ed, is then ramped up in the body to compensate for the lack of the immune system.
Brilliant explanation. Brilliant. So it's okay. So gratitude, acceptance, breath work, calm your nervous system. Of course, we're all familiar with different ways to calm the vagus nerve, and there's many ways to reset it. And ice cold baths and warm and saunas is probably as good as any. But I mean, I guess any form of exercise or mindfulness and meditation is anywhere where there's breath work involved, and a feeling of nature, feeling relaxed in your surroundings, away from the stresses of technology and urban living. I guess all this stuff is going to calm you down, which
Absolutely.
is all.
Where possible, allowing for timescales, is to get up in the morning, first thing in the morning, without having eaten anything, and go for a brisk 20-minute walk at a very brisk pace. So I would recommend 120 beats per minute. So that's 2 paces per second. And when you're doing that, just breathe in and out through your nose only, because that will activate the body and bring all the systems online. But the good thing about walking is you don't have to think about it. And so your brain will then be free to use your curiosity and your imagination to think about your day. And if you feed it your gratitude from the previous evening, and say, I wonder what today will hold for me, you're now starting to be curious and imaginative about what your day is going to hold. And we know from science that as your eyes are scanning as you walk, you can process so much more easily, which is exactly where the clinical therapy of EMDR comes from: eye movement, reprocessing, and desensitization. So when the brain is scanning and it doesn't have to think about what it's doing because you know how to walk, your imagination will come into play for you in a way that drives curiosity and fascination about your day, instead of stress, fear, and anxiety.
Fascinating. And you also get a vitamin D response in the morning, I think, from sunlight.
Correct. If you're getting sunlight in the first 30 minutes, you're getting vitamin D, and but also, Ed, what you're doing is resetting a chemical in the body called adenosine. And adenosine builds in pressure over the course of sort of a 16-hour day and eventually triggers melatonin. So we're setting our body clock for a good sleep cycle, which is important for recovering our emotional well-being.
So get outside in the morning is the hack.
Yeah.
So we went backwards there a little bit. So I think we were on the things that you do for. I mean, Mark, jump in if you've got something you want to comment on this. But I mean, maybe we can go now to, you do a lot of coaching, you do executive leadership, emotional intelligence type work, presentations. You're very much in that coaching space. And you're obviously in one-on-one counseling and therapy with people. Presumably not all of your clients have got suicide ideation. You do coaching for general issues that people come across. It's difficult to sort of know where the question is there. I think if people are listening and are maybe not somewhere in between downward spiral of negativity into depression, what are the things that you notice from your clients, obviously confidentially, or the emotional traits that you see in management that people can think about in terms of improving their emotional management? So disruptive emotional management, confrontation management, the skills that they can bring into their life that are possibly causing them to not be speaking their own truth, which is causing them a lot of emotional problems, whether it's anger management, people not letting things out, and therefore they're suffering they're in self-sabotage techniques of drinking, alcohol, porn. What is there's a massive list of statements there. What are the main things that are coming out of your work in terms of the problems that people are facing, let's assume men, and the things that you're advising them, to start thinking about and doing? And maybe take a few examples if you can.
Sure. The first thing that happens is people's perception becomes skewed towards the negativity, as I've already said. And our brain's perception mechanism is the switch that switches on our chemistry. So if the brain perceives something as being painful or uncomfortable in their environment, in their relationship at home, in their relationships at work, in what they're having to focus on, then the chemistry is automatically stress chemistry, because the perception is one of threat. So it's about helping people to balance their perception. Whenever we realize that we are starting to feel like we're losing control of our ability to regulate the relationship or to regulate the conversation, and the special forces do this exceptionally well. They're taught to, when things are not going their way in a firefight, for example, and we hear about the American SEALs using box breathing to control their central nervous system. So the British Special Forces, the Special Boat Service particularly, who I've got a couple of friends and a couple of clients from there, they are taught to pause, breathe, evaluate, recalibrate your approach, and only then to act. So the pause is the primary bit that allows you to make space to breathe, to take control of your breathing, then to evaluate the relationship, the situation, etc. Think about all of the amazing resources you have available to you, and then figure out which is the best resource to call on. And it may be a friend that you need to get some advice from. It may be a counselor, a coach, or a mentor, or it may just be a case of understanding that I need to practice some self-care to help me regulate my perception that I'm not able to control this. That would be the first piece of advice, is just pause, breathe, realize you've got some amazing internal resources, and you're probably surrounded by some pretty good people that you could have a confidential conversation with.
So in the summary, what I'm hearing is don't react in an emotional state.
So the doctor would say the patient reacted negatively to the treatment, and unfortunately, well, you can finish the sentence, has got worse, has passed away. They would also say the patient responded well to the treatment and made a full recovery. So whenever we find ourselves reacting, there will usually be a negative outcome because we're in stress response. And the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, reason, and security, is switched off by cortisol. Because if you're being chased by a lion, it's not time to stop and think and strategize. It's time to act instinctively. So when we pause and breathe, we bring the prefrontal cortex back online as cortisol dials down, and now we can evaluate, and now we can think a little bit more clearly. Now we can take some time to consider our options.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So moving on from that, what would be your second kind of, again, I'll put you on the spot here a little bit. So pause. I mean, again, I'm reading a book called The Mental Mess at the moment, and there's a strategy in there, I don't know if you've read it, which is exactly what the army are using in terms of assessing the emotions, sitting with the emotions, processing the emotions, and then actually analyzing your response and being far more critical and strategic in terms of your thinking about a disruptive emotion being exactly that. And understanding that it's an emotion and it doesn't define what you are or who you are or your relationships, and therefore your brain can reprogram itself to act in a far more structured, systematic way and therefore it can behave differently in terms of your thought patterns, because the brain is not expecting an emotional reaction; it's expecting a considered, thoughtful response. And I believe from the book that you can actually reprogram the body and the brain around that mechanism. So
absolutely,
that's very, very powerful. I mean, I guess it's some form of CBT type training within that, which I think most doctors and therapists will usually recommend CBT.
It's the go-to. It's the go-to standard practice that the NHS use, followed by EMDR, but it doesn't work for everybody. So cognitive behavioural therapy, you're trying to get the logical part of the brain to override the emotional part of the brain.
Sure.
By using logic and reason. The equivalent I give you is if you've got a 4'11" woman in India riding a 5-ton bull elephant, that's the equivalent of the logical brain being the woman, the 5-ton bull elephant being the emotional mind. And that's great as long as there's trust there. But when the elephant gets a fright, sees a mouse or sees a tiger, and goes trumpeting off into the jungle in fear, who's in control now? The elephant or the mahout? It's the elephant. And so we've got to calm that emotional process down, which is absolutely what the book's talking about. So here's something for most of the listeners and their viewers to understand. You can only hold an emotion as long as you can hold your breath.
Say that again. Oh. That's extremely powerful.
You can only hold an emotion as long as you can hold your breath. When you hold your breath, and most people struggle to hold their breath for more than 2 minutes, feel free to go ahead and test yourselves. What you have to do is breathe out and re-energize your lungs. When you're thinking of an emotionally distressing situation, the more energy you feed it, the more it maintains that energy. If you don't give it any more energy, like you don't give your lungs any more breath, there is no energy left in that emotion and it will fade and die away.
So if you are overthinking on an emotion or a pattern of emotions and you're ruminating, how do you give some tips to people to break those cycles? I mean, obviously going to the gym, exercising,
First of all, to understand that in the absence of clarity, your imagination will always step in and fill the gaps.
Yes.
So what you have to do is challenge your perception. Where is the evidence to say, I can't cope with this? With all the amazing resources I have at my fingertips, my friends, my relationships, my coach, my mentor, a therapist, where is the evidence to say, I can't find a technique that can help me here?
Sure.
And that calms down the imagination. And when I work with clients who are, and some of them have had quite severe panic attacks, the first thing we do is center the brain back on what I know to be factually true. So we use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. 5 things you can see, shout them out right now in the room. Okay, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Now I've taken the imagination out of the picture. The brain is working with factual evidence, which is real. And now I'm centered. Now I can breathe again, and now I can direct their attention to something more productive. So they're simple techniques. It's just challenge the evidence. You know, the narrative we're telling ourselves, the negativity, where is the evidence to prove that is the only option?
Wow. I mean, that's a very good technique. I mean, the monkey mind, the mental chatter, you know, the ability to control your thoughts. I think a lot of people suffer with overthinking. And I think when you're tired, overwhelmed, lost, emotional, whatever else, the mental chatter, you know, is extreme. So that's a really good skill, actually, to break those habits or break those cycles. I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of self-help that people can do. And I think, you know, for me, anxiety is always heightened when I've been out and drinking and again, trying to stop that now. And obviously diet, exercise, being in nature, you know, the very, very basic responsibilities that you can put upon yourself to look after the basic toxicity in your body and regulate what's processing through your brain. And, you know, I think we probably go on about it a bit too much, but it starts with good physical, emotional, it starts with good physical and mental health. But you've got to do the basics. I'm sure you'd agree with this. You've got to do the basics to look after your body and gut as well, which is now very popular. So yeah, would you, I mean, again, that seems very obvious, but again, 10 years ago, Mark and I was like, a lot of people were sitting in town drinking beers after work, you know, not eating particularly. Yeah, but okay. So what would you say to those guys who don't know what maybe we know now, which is that isn't particularly a good thing for your mental health? And so stuck in that career loop, maybe in their 30s, mid-30s, whatever.
Understanding a little bit of biology and a little bit of neuroscience makes all the difference. So when the fetus in the womb is developing, the brain cell, which divides into 2, half of it becomes the brain, the other half becomes the gut, which we call the second brain. There are over 400 more neural pathways from the lower gut, the microbiome, to the brain than there is the other way around. Wow. What did we do? What did we do, guys, during COVID? What did we use on our hands all the time?
Alcohol. I don't know. Is this off the record?
Yeah, well, we used alcohol gel, didn't we? What does alcohol do? It kills bacteria.
Yeah.
Our microbiome is a mass of beneficial bacteria, and when we overconsume alcohol, we kill it. And so we feel unwell because we are unwell.
We're poisoning ourselves.
But we're killing the microbiome with alcohol, and we're not eating well, and we're not taking care of ourselves, and we're anxious, and we're toxifying our body with cortisol and adrenaline. And that's great and fine if it's an acute stressor. You deal with the stress, you go back to relaxation, and you get on with it. But if you're under chronic stress that lasts 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, your body gets no respite. It's constantly flooded with toxicity because too much cortisol and adrenaline becomes toxic. You've heard of adrenal fatigue because the kidneys are working too hard, pumping adrenaline.
Sure. And is the adrenaline if you're drinking or taking any substances, or is the adrenaline a function of fatigue on the body, so the body pumps itself with because you're tired, or is it a function of detoxification?
Well, the small sort of pads on top of the kidneys, which, you know, produce the adrenaline and the cortisol, are just basically being overworked. So it's adrenal fatigue, not kidney fatigue.
Okay. But so why is the body producing? Why is the body producing that? Is that
because the perception of the brain is that I'm under threat. I'm losing control
from toxic poisoning.
No, I'm losing control because my perception is I'm not able to cope, and I'm having to self-medicate with alcohol.
So it's not the alcohol that's causing the adrenaline; it's the actual
overworking. Overworking
Okay.
the adrenal, yeah, overworking the stress response and not
Okay.
giving it any respite. If you got in your car on your driveway, left the car in neutral with the handbrake on, but just sat there and revved your engine into the red zone consistently for 2 weeks, what would happen to your engine? That's what's happening to the body. That's what you're doing with the body. You know, you're not using cortisol effectively. It's designed for fight or flight. So act, you know, use the energy to burn off the cortisol, but we don't. We sit there and stew on it.
Yeah. I think we're all starting to realize that alcohol is not one's best friend.
It can be good as long as we use it to celebrate a success in our,
not drown a failure.
Yeah, not to take revenge on our stressful week.
Yeah.
So celebrate success and enjoy it for the benefit that it brings. You know, it liberates you a little bit and makes you lighthearted. And that's absolutely great, but don't overdo it. But if you've got a good, strong hydration process going through the day, you can, you know, compensate them both. If you drink a little bit too much at night, have a good 2 liters, 2.5 liters the next day, you know, and regulate your system back to where it should be.
Okay, brilliant. Mark, have you got anything you want to jump in on? I'm conscious I'm asking all the questions, or do you want me to carry on? Are you enjoying it?
I'm geeking out a little bit because I'm somebody who is fascinated by neuroscience, right? So what I'm listening is Andy talking about different neurotransmitters, talking about how the body is responding to the breath, right, and regulating that central nervous system, and this idea of that the brain actually can't see, so it's responding to you've mentioned a couple of times your perception of an event, and it's how you're then digesting it, which is then releasing the neurotransmitters, and then the body is responding, which is, once you understand that basic form of neuroscience, is absolutely fascinating. That it's how you're observing the information coming in. And then we've talked about pausing, and if you were to start practice, we've touched on it a few times, practice observing what you're seeing, whether it's in front of you or these thoughts. A couple of other things as well, like the gratitude. It's such a, I've got a question for you in a second, Andy, but it seems like such a obvious thing to say, but it's so hard, right? Being grateful is very difficult. How often in your life, you know, to you gents or to anyone listening, did someone say to you, "Oh, you're so ungrateful," right? It's a very, in my observation, in my experience, being grateful is a very difficult thing, because more often than not, it's someone has done something for you and they expected you to be grateful. You didn't ask for it. So gratitude, I think deliberately practicing gratitude is an excellent tool to add to your daily routine. I liked how Andy said, do it in the evening, so that before you go to bed, just think of something that you're grateful for, whether it be somebody else or something about yourself. We have to thing as well.
Yeah, we have to be really careful, Mark, about the language that you use. If you don't mind me just picking up on something that you shared there, that gratitude can seem to be incredibly difficult. Well, if we use that language pattern, we are just feeding our subconscious mind information that says, I want to find gratitude difficult. Okay, so gratitude is very simple and very easy to do if you are focusing on the reason why. Yeah. So if I choose to say, okay, I'm grateful that my health is okay. I'm grateful that I can breathe well. I'm grateful that I've got some privacy where I can just put my life into context. I'm grateful that I'm surrounded with people that I can, you know, tap into. Then gratitude becomes easy. And what it does, the more we practice it, the more of the beneficial neurotransmitters and hormones are created. So if you go to bed and put your head on the pillow at night and you're falling asleep with stress chemistry because you're fearful, anxious, or worried, you've got adrenaline and cortisol. And for the next 8 hours, your subconscious mind is going to focus on the last thing you were thinking of and try to provide you lots of evidence for where you're going to find more of it. Whereas if we fall asleep with pleasure chemistry, we get serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and all the feel-good chemistry, bathing us in really nice tonic hormones. And one of the reasons why hydration is so important is that if you've been in a stressful situation, you wake up in the morning, you often feel very fuzzy-headed. And lots of depressed people feel they wake up more tired than when they went to bed. And that's because the brain is processing and trying to process the emotions during REM sleep. But another really fascinating piece of research that's come out of neuroscience is that when we go to sleep at night, our blood pressure drops naturally. And if we're well hydrated and our system is pressurized well enough, the spinal fluid then washes the brain clean of all the metabolic waste that's been created during the stressful day, and literally rinses your brain clean, giving it capacity to function the next day. And a lot of evidence now is pointed to dementia and Alzheimer's as being the buildup of these residual metabolic wastes, plaques, etc., in the brain, which prevents it functioning. So again, if anyone is recognizing they're in stress or they're going through a very difficult time, primarily go back to your self-care, hydrate well, take some exercise, breathe well, try to feed your microbiome with things like, you can buy these little yogurt drinks, Yakult, which have got the natural bacteria. Anything that's fermented, pickled cabbage, kimchi, anything like that.
Kombucha.
Yeah. Kombucha, so feed ourselves, look after yourself. If your car was not driving very well, you'd put it in the garage for service. If you've got 2 flat tires and a knocky exhaust, well, you take care of it because you need it. Your body's exactly the same.
Yeah, so brilliant advice, and don't stimulate yourself pre-bedtime. And I've gotten into a habit in the last few months of actually saying the Lord's Prayer, which is a gratitude-based sort of prayer, not because I'm particularly religious or Christian. It's just it has very basic things like being grateful and acceptance and doing your best. And it's just, to me, it's just an ability to spend a couple of minutes before I go to sleep. It's a gratitude statement. So I think any kind of mantra, you can write down the things that you're grateful for, you can repeat them late at night, and you'll go to bed hopefully with shutting off those stress responses and ruminating around bad things that have happened in the day. I mean, it's a brilliant bit of advice, I think, just to regulate yourself emotionally at the right times of day or night. And you're getting into a routine there, which the body will appreciate, I guess.
That is the key point, Ed. The key point is you've got to make an emotional connection with the thing that you're saying as the mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because if you don't, the critical filter in the brain goes, well, that's a load of rubbish, which is why manifestation doesn't work. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. But if you don't take any action, it's never going to happen. And the critical filter goes, well, prove it. You're not showing any evidence to prove you're going to do anything.
Well, you're doing yourself a disservice there, aren't you? Because you're not actioning your statements, and that's going to lead to all kinds of imposter issues and mental health problems.
So going back to centering yourself on what you know to be accurate and factually true about your environment and about yourself, you give yourself confidence that you can take the next step.
Yes.
So
but
I agree with you.
It also lends to a fact that a lot of people, and myself included, I think most human beings have a degree of delusion in their lives, whether it's of grandeur or what they're capable of, or indeed what they're expecting to achieve. And I think that those mechanics of actually what you've just said will keep people checked in reality of what's actually happening versus what the stories that we tell ourselves of what we were brought up to believe we were, and that is a constant problem in life. And I think it causes a lot of stress on people that they have a story then tell themselves, which is a phrase Mark uses a lot. And this idea of human sort of delusion that we all believe we're a slightly different person than we probably are as per the acts and the actions that we take. So I always think, going on from that it's as you said, it's action based. It's the facts that we are seeing, and it's the actions that we're taking that will define the way that our body and mind responds to it, not the fantasies we tell ourselves or used to believe, or our parents told us, or what we're talking about in the pub when we've had a few drinks and we think we're much better than we are. So it's really good, I think, that people center. And I think when we speak to people and do some coaching, the first bit of advice, rightly or wrongly, I give is spend some time on your own, quality time on your own in a peaceful environment to process a lot of emotions and thoughts. and work out what is important to you in terms of purpose and everything else. So that segues me into purpose. And we talked at the beginning of the conversation about your purpose. What is your purpose in life?
My purpose right now is to continue doing what I'm doing at the very highest level. So helping people demystify this thing we call mental health. You know, the British Medical Journal currently have an active piece of live research, and it states the purpose of this research is a multidisciplinary, international piece of research to identify the core concepts of mental health. I mean, if the British Medical Journal don't know what mental health is by now, how the hell have we got a hope in hell of figuring it out? You know, the World Health Organization says it's somebody's ability to function well and cope with the natural stresses of life. But what happens when the stresses aren't natural? What happens when you can't cope? So it doesn't help us. These definitions don't help us. Mental health is a massive umbrella phrase that everybody uses. And I've actually done this. I've had 20 chief executives in a room, and I've asked them all to write down individually your definition of mental health. So they spend a couple of minutes writing it down. I asked them all to read out their individual definition, and you get 17 variations on a theme. So your appreciation of mental health and mine is completely different.
We like to use the words mind health or emotional health, seem more real, I think, to us.
Yeah. I was hired by Amazon last year to speak to their organization on their mental health week. And I needed to talk about mental health. And I said, no, I won't do it. If I can talk about emotional well-being, that's completely different. There are only 9 emotional needs that every human being on the planet needs to get met. And each one of those can be measured very quickly. And
could you list them? Do you know
Absolutely,
them?
Yeah. The first one is the brain is always looking for safety and security. Do I feel safe in my environment, in my relationships, in my work relationships? The second one is autonomy or control. Do I feel in control of my choices and my decision-making processes? Or am I being overwhelmed by the pressure of life? Am I in control, or is life controlling me? Then there is attention. Babies are world-class experts at getting their needs met, because without us to support them, they would die. They wouldn't be fed, watered, or cared for. So attention, both giving attention and also receiving it, is very nutritious for us. And so we need to be, you know, in a process where we feel safe, we feel in control, and we're able to give attention to those that are important to us, and also to receive some recognition, some praise, and some reward from those that value us. And then there's a sense of community. We normally get those needs met in our community, outside of our family unit and outside of what we do for work. So our friendships, our social connections, our social relationships, possibly our sporting interests where we've got common threads. And then we find a sense of status. Our sense of identity, which we've spoken about a couple of times, comes into play. I feel valued for the contribution I give in my work environment, in my family, in my social groups, and I feel that reflected to me through the attention I receive, which makes me feel safe and secure in who I am, right? And so we've got status, and then we need to have intimacy. And I don't mean physical intimacy, whilst that's really important in a relationship. But do I have at least one emotionally intimate relationship with someone who accepts me unconditionally, non-judgmentally, warts and all, for who I am and how I show up? And it needn't be, you know, your spouse. It could be a grandparent. It could be a friend. It could be an associate, a colleague. It can be anybody that you feel a strong emotional connection with and they accept you. Yeah. And then we have a sense of achievement and accomplishment. When I look at my life, am I progressing my life? Am I achieving in line with my expectations and my hopes and my dreams and my desires? And am I achieving and accomplishing?
Brilliant.
Yeah?
Absolutely brilliant.
And then do I have the privacy to be able to sit on my own, take some time out to contemplate my emotions, put them into context, and put life's experiences into context? Have I got the privacy to do that? And then finally, it's a sense of purpose and meaning. Yeah. What does my life mean? And what is the purpose that gives me energy and enables me to step into my potential? So those are the 9 emotional needs that every human being on the planet needs to get met. And even the space station, the International Space Station, those astronauts still need those emotional needs met. And there are no others. They are not weaknesses. They are essential emotional needs.
Andy, that's absolute gold. I mean, I think people listening to that will just recognize it, and it's a way to manage your life, to manage your needs. I mean, it's just so powerful. I'd encourage. I mean, we'll put your details in the description, but maybe you can point people to that, or they can contact you, and you can give them a session on it or something. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people interested. I'm certainly very interested in it. Brilliant advice. Brilliant advice. I've got so many questions on that. I'm conscious of time. It's 7:05. We said we'd try and do an hour. So I want to use the last five or 10 minutes just to talk about, well, what would you like to talk about? What do you want to talk about? It's your show, Andy.
What would help the audience most, guys? What do you think?
Mark, any thoughts?
I
Are you still geeking out? Are you still geeking out there? And you're
Ed, I would absolutely love to do some sort of degree on neurology. I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be absolutely incredible. But once you, because it's helped me so much, once you start to, this is all about, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about learning more about yourself, right? About who you are, identity, how you show up, those emotional needs, very, very powerful, right? These exercises. But understanding an element of neuroscience and how you respond when you do certain things and your behaviors, that is to me, is just amazing, because you literally, every time you move, every time you think, you just, okay, this is happening. This might be why I feel angry. This is why this emotion is coming up. It's extremely helpful. It's not confusing.
Yeah.
If I ask you the question, guys, what cures fear? It's not action. Action doesn't cure fear, but knowledge cures fear. The more knowledge I've got about a subject, the less fearful I am of it, the less my imagination can distort it, because I've got factual knowledge and factual evidence. So that's really valid point, Mark. Really, the more knowledge we can share with people, the better. There is a good piece of research that proves, with a little bit of neuroscience understanding and understanding the brain's pattern matching perception mechanism, that when people are coming off their emotional addiction to self-medication, there's a 96% reduction in withdrawal symptoms, simply because they understand how the feelings are being created and what emotions are driving them, and how they can self-regulate them, and how they can self-care. And when you give a toolkit like that to someone and they're motivated, they can take responsibility.
This is a game changer, isn't it, for people?
It is.
So
really is.
So this is, if you don't mind, gents, I'll finish with a little idea. It feels like there's definitely a part B in this, because I would love to dig a little bit more into how we all define mental health, and then it's just such a massive topic. What we can do to improve, I would go as far as prevent any issues in this space that people are labeling. So we'll look to wrap up there, but there's one question, Andy. What is something that, and you might want to answer on the next episode, but what is something that in your mind is BS, right? About that we're potentially the larger audience or society is being lied to around mental health. What is something that maybe we should create some awareness around and avoid, that would dramatically improve what the majority define as mental health? Does that make sense?
That we are controlled by mental health. We're not. We are in control of our emotional well-being. You know, we are in control of our ability to feel well. We are in control of our happiness. Happiness is not dependent upon a situation in the future. You can be happy right now. Just focus on your gratitude. Focus on what you can control. You know, the old Reinhold Niebuhr prayer that is used in Alcoholics Anonymous is, grant me the serenity to change what I can change and to accept what I can't change. But first of all, to realize the difference between the two. So what is directly within my control? We can take an awful lot of fear and anxiety out of anyone by giving them control of what they can control and helping them to understand that their brain is designed to keep them alive. All of the systems are designed at keeping them alive. okay, not to drive them further down the depression cycle. And when people feel that they can't control it because they don't know how, and that mental health is now an issue that you cannot control apart from with medication. And don't forget, medication only treats the symptom. It doesn't treat the root cause.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You can't have a medicine that changes an emotion. It can influence the chemistry, but it can't change, it can't change sadness. It can't change lack of hope. That's what we are responsible for doing. And we can do that. We are in control.
So it's brilliant. I mean, it's the mind controls your mental health. The mind controls your emotional responses or your management of emotions, and it's the mind is the skills that you have that control your brain.
You're right, Ed. But it's the language that we tell ourselves in the words that we say to ourselves, and also the vivid imagery that we hold in picture form. Our subconscious mind cannot do anything other than try to provide it for us. It's our magic genie. When Aladdin rubs the lamp, the genie comes out. Master, I grant you 3 wishes. Our subconscious mind is exactly the same. If you tell it you're struggling, it will say, okay, I'll help you to struggle. If you tell it you feel confident, okay, I'll show you lots of evidence why you can be confident.
Yeah.
It can't tell the difference between something which is true and something which is vividly imagined. So when you give it a horror story, it doesn't know that it's not true.
I absolutely love this because Marissa Peer talks a lot about this, about that we only respond to 2 things: the words that we tell ourselves and the pictures that we create in our head. And this then falls into this, that your brain, you cannot tell the difference. And that more often than not, when people are responding to something and it's a thought, it's usually a memory. There'll be a memory of something, there's an emotion attached to the memory, etc. An absolutely fascinating conversation, Andy.
So every emotion,
have you back on.
Every emotion has a DNA. It's got a picture, it's got a sound, it's got a smell, and it's got a feeling attached to it.
Yeah, and people, I just want to finish. I mean, people worry about the unknown. They worry about things they've not received confirmation of. They worry about results. They worry about what's going to happen. And managing that unknown is about accepting that you can't manage the unknown. And it's that, flow like water kind of Eastern philosophy way of living, which I think the West needs more of. And I could talk to you for hours, and I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. You're a very eloquent, engaging man. Bald and handsome, so you get 10 out of 10 there. I mean, is there anything you want to end on? Where can people find you? We'll put your website and stuff in the comments on the YouTube, but do you want to just give people some thoughts about if they want to get hold of you?
Guys, I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. The website, if they want to go through the website, which is primarily linked to, attracting those that are looking for the counselling, it's www.peak, that's PEAK, personalperformance.co.uk. But by all means, connect on LinkedIn, connect on social media. Very happy to connect with people.
Fantastic. So one-on-one coaching, speaking, corporate stuff. Do reach out to Andy. It's been delightful to talk to you. I've learned so much. And we'll talk again, I hope.
Let's do part 2.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this Blue Mind conversation. We hope you've enjoyed the content and ask a small favour that you like and share the page. The bigger the page, the more interesting the guest should be, and the more content we can put out. If you are interested in talking to Mark and myself about any of the topics covered, coaching, speaking, or any other collaboration, please drop Mark or I an email at ed@Blue Mind Approach or mark@Blue Mind Approach, or contact us on our social media channels. Thank you for listening.